Good morning, class. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Okay, guys, everyone get out a pencil or a pen and some paper. Okay, so today we're going over the 700s to the 800s. This is the 8th century. We're mainly covering 4 different cultures. Those 4 different cultures are the Frankish, the Byzantine, the Anglo-Saxon, and the Islamic. So remember, all these are happening at the same period. So we're going to try to go over about one of them at a time. By the about mid 700s, over half the coast of the Mediterranean Sea is owned by Muslims. Much of the lands surrounding the Mediterranean Sea are owned by the Muslims. As you can see, I've got it here in yellow. All these different lands that are this yellow color, all are ruled by Muslims. Today we'll get to see how they expanded into Hispania, which is modern day Spain. And they'll start here over in Morocco. Oh, sorry, I'm pointing at it, not showing you guys, but Morocco area, and come over here. Of course, we went over this last week, but we're going over it a bit again. Hopefully Eli's here today so that he can hear some of what he missed last week. Newly converted Muslims called Berbers from North Africa invaded Spain in 711. Spain, or Hispania, was ruled by the Visigoths. Do you remember the Visigoths? Yeah? The ones who sacked Rome? Yeah, those guys. Okay, so this guy named Turek, who was once a slave but is now a powerful general of the Muslims, is leading the invasion into Spain. He noticed when they landed in Spain that his warriors seemed fearful, so he lit all of those ships that they came over to Spain in on fire so that they would no longer have any type of way out. It was fight to win or die trying. So he and his 7,000 men led on an attack against a king named Roderick and all of his Spanish forces. So here's Turek and his tough looking face. Okay, so they're in a great battle. For days, these two groups fought. The two sides fought to the death with their swords and spears. Turek, the Muslim leader, lost 3,000 men in this battle. However, he succeeded in killing Roderick and winning the battle. Next, Turek has them move north to one of their central strongholds. It is the city of Toledo. This city military all were fleeing before they even got there. They found the city of Toledo almost completely empty. Turek sent his forces after the fleeing men and had them all slaughtered. This was the start of the Muslim occupation of Spain. So, over time, they won Hispania. Obviously, they killed King Roderick. And the Muslims end up ruling Hispania/Spain for about another 700 years. Around 732, the Muslims went after Gaul, which is today's France. This is not their first attack on Gaul, but it's their first really big attack, and it has the biggest historical impact. Okay, around 732, the Muslims went after Gaul, today's France. 15,000 Muslim soldiers pushed into Bordeaux, where they plundered the the church for all of its treasures. So again, they plundered the church and took all of its treasures. Next, they headed to the city of Tours, which was 60 miles north. But sadly for them, Charles Martel was ready. Charles Martel was mayor of the palace. Pretty much he was the man in charge there at Gaul. He stood ready with 10,000 infantry and cavalry to intercept them. They fought for days in this gruesome battle where Charles Martel stood triumphant. The military commander for the Muslims was killed, and all the Muslims ended up retreating. Even though Charles was not king, he yielded significant power in Gaul. Okay, so Charles Martel's son, Pepin the Short, that's this guy, Pepin the Short, reached out to the Pope asking if the Pope thought it was right for a man to be king when he's not exerting his power. The Pope agreed and made Pepin king in 751 AD. So Pepin is now king. This was the start of a new dynasty in Gaul. It was the Carolingian dynasty. Again, Carolingian dynasty. One of the best known kings that comes from the Carolingian dynasty was Charlemagne. Charlemagne was born in 742 and died in 814. King Charlemagne was a very powerful leader, and he didn't just want to rule, he wanted to expand his empire greatly. He was pretty much a king of war. He waged wars against the Lombards and the Saxons. He pushed into what's modern day Germany. He fought against the Muslims in Hispania. He pushed and he pushed and he expanded. He, of course, failed some, especially when it comes to Spain, but he pushed and pushed to expand his empire. So it went from being the country of Gaul to being an empire, a vast empire. Pope Leo III saw Charlemagne as being a very powerful ally. In 800 AD, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne Emperor of the Romans. So he is now the Holy Roman Emperor. This is the start of the Holy Roman Empire, which will continue long after Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne did not spend his entire life just fighting. In his old age, he finally built a permanent home. He built it in 794 AD. Here, he started a different type of work. He worked on political reforms and improving literacy and learning for his people. Even though Charlemagne was most likely illiterate, he really wanted other people to be able to read, and he was very interested in learning himself. So since he's having people work on literacy and learning, this is called the Carolingian Renaissance. The Carolingian Renaissance really impacted Gaul. Just history in general. They translated much of the Roman writings that are in Latin into newer languages. So things that we might have even lost if it wasn't for them. They kept They brought all these ancient scripts to life in their time period and kept them well enough maintained that today we still have many of these documents and are able to read them. So that was one of the many things that Charlemagne did to impact history. He is so well known that if you look at a common deck of cards, Charlemagne is, I believe, the King of Hearts. He's one of the red ones. I believe is the King of Hearts. Okay, so Charlemagne created a school and a library where he had the top teachers and clergymen trained, and then they would send them throughout Gaul to train other people. So education spread throughout Gaul. Some of the scholars created the Carolingian script, which looks more like our modern writing today. The reason for this is at the time period before this was created, most things were everything was written in capital letters. There were no lowercase letters. So with this Carolingian script, we now have lowercase and capital letters. Let's see. Charlemagne's first two sons died before Charlemagne passed away. So the next leader ends up being Charlemagne's third son, Louis, who reigned from 1814 to 1840. Charlemagne also lived to be the age of 71, which at this time period is significant because most people didn't live that long. Okay, so Louis the King was not a good leader like his dad. He was very religious and intelligent, but he wasn't powerful. He was not a military leader in any way, and ended up losing a large portion of the land that his dad had conquered. Once Louis died, his remaining lands got separated between his three sons. So Charlemagne's kingdom shrunk again. Okay, so that's all we've got on Charlemagne for today. Now we're going over to the Byzantine Empire. And this might feel like deja vu, but we're going over Justinian again. But it's Justinian the second. Justinian became emperor at the age of 16. He was ruthless and he was cruel. He had some of his uncles' tongues cut out because he thought that he didn't like how they were acting. And so he took care of them in that way. By the age of 26, he was deposed. They cut off his nose and sent him into exile. Okay, so during this time period, you don't want to misbehave. You might lose a tongue or a nose. It's a real assault on the senses. Okay, so he was put into exile in the Crimean Peninsula. Justinian II escaped his exile and ran to Khan, the leader of Russia. While there in Russia, he ends up marrying the Khan's daughter. Then Justinian heard a rumor that the Khan was going to try to kill him due to conspiracies from the Byzantine leaders. Justinian II escapes just in case, and he heads his way back to his kingdom. He builds up an army and snuck back into his home and killed the current leader. So he ends up getting to reign again. Justinian reigns from 705 to 711. But Justinian makes a mistake. He continues being the jerk that he is and has way too many people killed. So he had what was called mass executions. And due to these mass executions, let me see this. Nope. Okay. Due to these mass executions, he ends up being put to death along with his whole family. So there's no way he's sneaking back this time. Our next emperor was Leo III. Not Leo III, the Pope, but Leo III, the emperor. Let's see. He, like the original Justinian, not Justinian II, but the first Justinian, he came up with a more practical and liberal legal manual. Sadly, it still included things such as cutting off people's noses and their feet and their hands. So, not the friendliest of ways to treat your criminals, but maybe it worked. Later in 775, the Byzantines had a new emperor, and this was Leo the Fourth. Oh, poor Leo. Leo the Fourth married a woman named Irene. Leo the Fourth only lived for 5 years after they got married. Wait, is that right? Sorry. Leo only lived for 5 years after being ruler. So he's only ruler for 5 years. Sorry about that, guys. After he died, Irene became regent for her son, Constantine the Fourth. So she is now the regent. She was one tough cookie. Over all of her years of ruling, Irene ruled roughly 27 years. In 790, Constantine the Fourth banished his mom. He's like, get out of here. Okay, so in 790, Constantine the Fourth banished his mom and took the throne. However, Irene got herself back in good favor with her son and then decided to have him blinded and possibly murdered. So, yeah, he shouldn't have let her back in. So for the next 5 years, Irene is an empress. She takes the name emperor. She is the first ever emperor of the Byzantine Empire that's a female. She rules from 797 to 802 AD. At this point in time, in 802, a group of generals deposed Irene and banished her to the island of Lesbos, where she died in 803. So she was banished in 802 and died in 803 AD. She was only 51 years old. Okay, so we went over the Islamic people taking over Spain, and then we went over the Islamic people going after Gaul, which is modern-day France, and then modern-day France chasing them away. And then we went over the rulers in modern-day France, such as Charlemagne. We went over to the Byzantine Empire and got to learn about Justinian II, and later on about the first female emperor, Irene, who was not the nicest of people. And now we're going to just do a quick review over the Anglo-Saxons over in England. So we learned a while back in Britannia that the Romans left. They left the now Britannicized Celtic people and Britannian people alone, which, if they'd left sooner, probably wouldn't have bothered them as much. But at this point in time, there's all these Germanic people coming in and trying to take over, which of course is the main reason of why the Romans left. So the Anglos, the Saxons, and the Jutes end up coming into Britannia, which we went over weeks ago. And they settled down there. They each took different sections of this territory. Their names eventually get combined instead of being the Anglos, the Saxons, and the Jutes, but they get combined to just being Anglo-Saxons. Okay. So these Germanic tribes, called the Saxons, Anglos, and Jutes, all settled in different parts of what is today England. The Anglo-Saxons dominated England until, 1066 AD. England had several kingdoms. Okay, so Northumbria. Wales, which is still a country today. Mercia. Wessex. Sussex. Kent, Essex, and East. Sorry, I'm writing so sloppy. East Anglia. There we go. So these are some of the main kingdoms in this current time period of Britannia/England. Okay, so we got the Anglo-Saxon England. And as we're going to get to go over a lot in the next few months, we get to learn that there's a class system in England. These kingdoms each are led by a king. So say each of these different areas that we listed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, 8. And there's probably even more than that. Each of them have their own king. Okay, so they're each led by a king. And the top of the class is the royal family. Then you have the major nobility right here. And below the major nobility, you have the minor nobility. And then we have the freemen, which leaves us with serfs. So serfs were not just what we know of as serfs, but they were both serfs and slaves at this time period, which serfs are pretty much slaves, but I would say that they have it in both terms of uses of the words of both slave and serfs. If we remember that serfs normally came with land, so say Lord Byron inherited a land from his uncle. On that land, say it's 500, 600 acres, are multiple different farms, and those farms have people on them, and those people are serfs who stay on that land, and they work for whoever is the ruler, which would be Lord Byron, and they have to take care of both Byron's crops and their own crops. All the land that these serfs work on is not their land. It's like their payment from Lord Byron that I've made up, is the ability to use a portion of the land to grow their food. If they try growing their own food in sections of the land that is not set aside for them, it is counted as stealing, even though they grow it themselves. I do believe at this time period they have slaves that would not be completely connected to the land, where the person could bring them from one place to another. So that's what I was trying to say. Okay. So English came from the Anglo-Saxons, which is pretty cool. We're finally getting to learn where our language comes from. Of course, if we talked to someone at this time period who's an Anglo-Saxon, we would not understand most everything that they're saying. So at this time period, it's called Anglo-Saxon language, or as we normally hear it, Old English, and it's like old English. People like Chaucer and blanking on the other one during this time period, but okay, well, I'll just say Chaucer. Chaucer wrote Canterbury Tales. His time period of writing is more of Middle English. And so that is much easier for us to read, yet hard, easier to read than old English that we're talking about right now for the Anglo-Saxons. But this was the start of it. Many of the root sounds and words come from here. They also combine over the ages words from the Germanic languages, and some from France, and a lot from Latin, which if you study our language, you can obviously find. Okay, so it's pretty neat to finally get to see where our current day language comes from. Hope you guys learned a little bit today. As I'd said earlier, we went over the 4 cultures, the Frankish, sorry guys, I need water. The Frankish, Byzantine, Anglo-Saxons, and Islamic cultures. Yeah. The Muslims own a lot of land at this time period. The Berbers fight the Visigoths. The Visigoths lose. Their king dies. They rule there for another 700 years. We get to learn about Charles Martel, who is very good at ruling, even though he's not the king. This is the time of puppet kings. We got to learn about King Pepin being the first of the Carolingian dynasty in 751, and then his son, King Charlemagne, one of the most famous kings of all time, who ended up being crowned Holy Roman Emperor. Then we went over to the Byzantine Empire and learned about Justinian II, who lost his nose, poor guy. And then about Emperor Leo IV, who married Irene, who's not a very nice lady. And then she rules for 27 years. She ends up killing her son, most likely. She's banished and she dies. Then we came over to England and learned about their class system, which we're going to hear a lot about in the next few months. Okay, guys, I hope you guys have a good week. Take time to take your notes, and I will email out your homework. Have a good day.